Most people say, why did I wait so long?
Does everyone have a handout?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you for braving this topic. So just to give a little context before we get started, one of my areas of sort of pastoral interest and ministry is end-of-life care. I've done a death doula training, have focused a lot on grief and pastoral care in just my experience and my research. And Five Wishes sort of comes in that same vein of topic. It asks the question.
Ricky.
You can pass that back to Vicky. It has us reflect on the question, what does a good death look like? And this is something that I think is really important for everyone to think through, no matter your age or stage of life. Because as we know, things can change very rapidly, diagnoses can come in. And one thing to just kind of front with is that sometimes Five Wishes, the things that you hope for in a good death aren't able to come to be due to where you are, due to your medical issues, due to a sudden tragedy. But by doing preparation and thinking, what would a good death look like? What would the room smell like? Who would be around me? Where would I be? By doing that thinking ahead of time, it then means that when you are in the midst of needing to make decisions, you have something to draw upon. You're not just going through, you're not just kind of going from whatever you're feeling in that moment. You're going from something you thought about and then you've communicated with your family.
Jason, you were out.
We're going to pass that back as well. I'll put them by the pen. And so Five Wishes is sort of a formalized structure for doing some of this thinking. And we'll go through it together, so no need to kind of flip ahead or anything right now. And the thing that's cool about Minnesota is that things like the Five Wishes are binding if they're signed correctly. So if you say, if possible, I would like to die at home, and your doctor says, well, you could, but you could also be in the hospital. This is something that they are ethically required to sort of use as best as possible. So if it is an option of, actually, yeah, you could go home. We can do some home health care, we can do home hospice. If you want to be home and not in the hospital, we can make that happen. So it's things like that where this is a document that, again, properly signed, counts as a legal document where you can have your wishes and have those be executed to the best of ability. And again, due to circumstances, oftentimes this is, you're sort of thinking of it in an ideal world, knowing that we don't live in an ideal world. But also knowing that even in less than ideal situations, you can still have some agency and control over what blankets are on you, whether or not the TV is blaring the news in the background. Like all of those things, you do have agency over. So I'm going to start us out with a question from the Go Wish game, which is, the back of this is, it gives you an easy, entertaining way to think and talk about what's important to you if you become seriously ill. So this, I'm just going to draw a random card, and then you're going to think about the answer, and then we'll talk either in pairs or as a large group, depending. So, that's actually hard to do if you're just doing it out of the beginning. Okay. So the way that this deck of cards works is there's a prompt on it and you think about how important or not important what is on here is to you. So to say goodbye to important people in my life. Is that something that's, we'll do this together. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being, it would be nice, but it's not that important to me, to 5 being, that would actually be one of the most important things to me. Where are you on that scale?
Read the question again.
To say goodbye to important people in my life.
I'm definitely a 5. Say goodbye to important people.
I see a lot, several of us
Yep,
put
so
it
yeah, so
too.
really sort of a range. For a couple folks, it's not that important. For some people, it's very, very important. Okay, next one. To be free from pain. So to have good pain management.
Well, I'd like that.
Yeah, this is one that tends to be important for a lot of folks. Yeah.
It's tough to do this.
Yeah, but I see a talent in that. To have close friends nearby. So to have close friends like in the room or in the space. Yeah, again, big range. Some folks not at all important, some folks very important. And then we'll end with this one. To keep my sense of humor. Unsurprisingly, a lot of 5s in this room.
I don't want to use
I don't know that there's a whole lot of control.
So questions like that are some of the ones that 5 Wishes invites us into and end of life planning conversations invite us into. Really just thinking about what is important and what's not. And that's so individual to the person, to the cultural background that you have, to the family structure you've built. There are some folks who want to be alone. They don't want a large group of family and friends surrounding them. They might want just 1 or 2 dear people. Or again, there are some folks who it does really seem like they wait to die until they are alone, until the cousin has left to go to the vending machine and the room is empty. And then you have folks who want to be surrounded by people, to be encircled by prayer and singing. And there's no judgment in any of these. It is so individual and personal. There is no wrong answer. And one of the reasons that documents like this are important is that especially if you're in a situation where your own ability to communicate has lessened, other people want to make these decisions for you. People will say, oh, but they have to have this. Even if you say, actually, I don't care if my 3rd cousin gets here. Like, just wait for the funeral. Like, I don't need to see them, I'm good. A lot of times folks make assumptions about what our choices are, and so having documents like this helps us have agency in those situations. So we're gonna get started, and the 5 sort of sections that we'll move through. First, I don't expect this to be fully finished today. This is a thing you're gonna take home with you. Partially because if the person you want to be your healthcare agent isn't in this room right now, that's a conversation you need to have with them and to make sure they have a copy of this, and we'll go over that. But the 5 wishes that we'll go over are your wish for the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want, how comfortable I want to be, how I want people to treat me, and what I want my loved ones to know. So we're going to start by just putting our name on the front. Print just so other people can read it easily. And again, some of this we're just kind of going to move quickly through today, and you can do it later if you'd like. So then in on the first page is just giving some context to the 5 wishes. There are many things in life that are out of our hands. This 5 wishes document gives a way to control something very important. How you're treated if you get seriously ill or are at the end of your life. It is an easy, despite how many pages it is very easy to complete. And once it's filled out and signed, it is legal in the state of Minnesota. And so how this can help, we've already talked about some of this, but it lets you talk with your family, friends, and doctor about your wishes. Your family members won't have to guess what you want. It protects your family from having to make hard choices without knowing what you want. And if you receive one of these from a loved one, from a family member, it helps you know what your loved one wants. And so how 5 wishes began, we'll skip over that for now. So this document is for anyone 18 and older, which everyone in this room is. It can be really used no matter your life circumstances. And it's something that has been developed so robustly that it is a pretty common document that you'll see around. If you go to like a living will workshop or anything like that, 5 wishes is often something that is brought up because it is thorough and well done. So the one thing I will note on this is, so if you are updating documents, so if you've done something like this before where you say, this is who my healthcare agent is, this is how I want to be cared for, the way that that works legally is the most recent document is the binding one. So if you did 5 wishes a decade ago and your wishes have changed from that time, which is really common, like this is something that we're filling out once now, but is actually something that you might want to revisit every year or every few years as life changes. What might have been your favorite song that you wanted to be surrounded by could be a song you can no longer stand. And that's like a surface level thing, but like we change over time and what we want changes over time. So the most recent healthcare directive, the most recent 5 wishes is the one, that's the valid one. And it's important to, once you've filled it out and if you want to use it, to then give it to people who need to have it. This document, if it's under your bed in a file folder labeled family pictures, no one's gonna find that. No one can use that if you don't like have it in places where, like, so give a copy to your doctor, give a copy to your healthcare person. If you have kids, give a copy to your kids. It is, again, only useful if people have it. Because no one is a mind reader, which is also why we do things like this. Okay, so we're gonna go into wish, yes, Vicki.
No, I already have a legal trust done. Which, if I do this one more currently, is this over the legal?
No, so a legal trust has to do with finances, which is completely separate.
But it also has all my directives and everything in it.
If you fully sign this, then that would update that part of
Okay.
it, but not all of it. And you might, some of this might be a repetition, so again, we'll sort of fill out how much makes sense for you to fill out. But yeah, it doesn't, this has nothing to do with finances, this is only about healthcare wishes, end of life wishes, things like that.
How this is different from a living will then?
It is very similar to a living
Because
will.
if you have a living will, you just still do this? No. Is this a base of a living will?
If you have a living will, again, that has a lot to do with sort of finances and assets. If if you've already thought about some of these questions in there, then this is just sort of a helpful worksheet to make sure it's still what you want. But if you have a living will, I do tend to recommend, like, I don't actually love the advice of get rid of all your old copies that are in here. I actually don't like that. I would recommend not sort of making this active if you have other documents until you've talked with who helped you prepare those. Is sort of the best sort of advice on that.
Without knowing very much about the 5 wishes, it feels to me like some of the things you discussed, how do you want your end time to be, is not something that was approached or dealt with in our living will, if I can call it that, the directive about when do we want to be intubated or not. I mean, the idea of who would you like to be surrounded with, or would you rather be more alone? Do you want music? I mean, those are things that would supplement those very medical directives.
Decisions.
Yeah, in my head.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. There's definitely things in here that supplement, just because it is having a different conversation about end of life than lots of other folks tend to have. So, for wish 1, it's the person I want to make healthcare decisions for me when I can't make them for myself. So this is, the way this document works is as we get further into it, it will be more likely that you have not thought about the questions. This first wish is pretty likely that most folks in here have thought about. So I would just at this point invite you to write down the name of 1 to 3 people who you would want to make decisions for you in order of preference. And so if I'm no longer able to make my own healthcare decisions, this form names the person I choose to make these choices for me. This person will only make health choices if both of these things happen. My attending or treating doctor finds I'm no longer able to make health choices, so if I am in a coma or I'm unable to speak, and a second healthcare professional also agrees that that is true. So the reason for that 2-layer is that we have a not great history in our country of saying that people are unfit to make their own medical choices based on mental health diagnoses, gender, what the illness is. And so having it need to have 2 doctors agree to it just limits the possibility of one doctor acting not so ethically. Or saying, it would actually be easy, like, what this person is saying they want is actually much harder than what their family says they want, so let's just go with what the family says. You need 2 doctors to trigger your health agent. So I would just invite you to write down 1 to 3 names. If you've already done a living will or healthcare directive, ideally these names should be the same as the ones you have on there. If they're different when you're thinking about them today, that might be a thing to return to that other document about. But just write down 1 to 3 people who you would want to make your health decisions if you no longer could. And if you haven't thought about this before, some of the advice for who to pick. So choose someone who knows you very well, who cares about you, and who can make difficult decisions. A spouse or family member might not actually be the best choice because they're too emotionally involved, but sometimes they are the best choice. You know best. Choose someone who's able to stand up for you so that your wishes are followed. It also is generally recommended that for healthcare agents, you pick someone close by so that they can help when you need them. If it's someone who is going to take a week to be able to get to your bedside, that's not necessarily the best option for a healthcare agent when faster decisions might need to be made.
However, in this electronic age, can you say that, say your first and second choices are unavailable, and third choice is over, well, Chris is gonna be in Germany.
Yep.
Could it be done over a Zoom meeting?
I'm not sure about
Yeah,
probably.
yeah,
I think
since
so.
we're going into electronic stuff like this,
Yeah.
you could possibly make a note, or ask your provider, whatever, or whoever does these things, would a Zoom meeting be allowable or legitimate?
Yep.
Because, like I said, you know, who knows where they're all gonna be at one time.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay, so once you have those names, we're gonna turn to the next page, so page 5. And here is where you start to make more specific choices in this document. So understanding that your healthcare agent can make decisions, I want my agent to be able to do the following. So this is a list of decisions that a healthcare agent might be asked to make. If there is one of them or more of, like if there are some of these where you're like, actually, I don't want someone else making these decisions for me, even if I can't, you just cross that out. That might also be if you have someone else, so if you have, if there's 2 people in your family, one of whom is this is the person I trust to argue with the doctors on my behalf. And this is the person I trust to talk to the lawyers about my money and estate, and those are not the same person. You probably want to cross out, take legal action needed to carry out my wishes. If your healthcare agent is not, like if you don't want, if you don't want it to escalate to that level, you might want to cross that out. Or if you, actually this is a better example for that. So if, again, healthcare agent is the person who you trust to carry out your wishes, talk to the doctors, you don't want them to see your bank account information. You probably want to cross out, apply for Medicare, Medicaid, or other programs or insurance benefits for me. So if you have a separate person who you want to do things like that, you would cross that out. So yeah, so just read through the list and see if there's anything that you would not want your healthcare agent to do. So we're going to keep moving along. This is again something that you can return to. And this list I also find important as each of us might also be someone asked to be a healthcare agent for someone else. To just sort of know the range of things that you might be saying yes to. That's why I do strongly recommend that whoever your healthcare agent is, you go over this packet with them or the equivalent living will that you have, just so they know that, oh, when I'm saying yes to being your healthcare agent, that means that I might be asked to make a decision about donating your organs. What would you like me to do with that? Like, this shows the scope of what a healthcare agent might be asked to decide. And it is, it is a not insignificant ask to make these decisions for another person. That is a responsibility. And so if someone asks you to be their healthcare agent, now that you've done this workshop, you can say, I'm open to that, but let's really talk through what that means and what you want. We're gonna go to the next page. We're gonna go to wish to. So my wish for the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. So the statement at the beginning of this is, I believe that my life is precious and I deserve to be treated with dignity. When the time comes that I'm sick and not able to speak for myself, I want the following wishes and any other directions I have given to be respected and followed. So for these, I would, so for these first three, so what you should keep in mind as my caregiver, cross out any that you wouldn't want. So the first one says, I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medicine to relieve my pain, even if that means that I will be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. Some people want that level of pain management, some people don't. I do not want anything done or omitted by my doctors or nurses with the intention of taking my life. So this one I actually find a little harder to interpret. What I think it means is that if you want every possible life-saving measure, so if you would want to be intubated, if you would want to be kept in a medical coma until they could stabilize you, if you would want so if you want sort of all possibilities, and there's some more specifics in the next one. And then I want to be offered food and fluids by mouth and kept clean and warm. So then we move to what life support treatment means to me. So life support treatment means any medical procedure, device, or medication that keeps you alive. So it includes things like intubation, medical devices put in me to help me breathe. Food and water supplied by medical device, so tube feeding, CPR, major surgery, transfusions, dialysis, antibiotics. Here's a space where if you have any religious or personal beliefs or desires related to things like this, you would write them here. There's some religions that are opposed to blood transfusions, for instance. There are, I think that's one of the main ones that I actively know about, but there's also some folks who wouldn't want antibiotics or certain medications. So if you have any of those restrictions, you can put them here. I will say from a theological point, Lutheranism is fine with all of these things. Medical treatment is largely viewed as a gift from God because God has created the wisdom and the people who have been able to discover this and to live it out. And so there is not a religious prohibition for against blood transfusions or anything like that in the Lutheran faith. You might have personal beliefs or other religious beliefs that have those limitations, but in our denomination, all life support treatment that an individual wants is fine and good. Okay. This does not. So this document, we don't go into do not resuscitate forms. That is a separate document that you need to talk with your family and healthcare providers on. So let's jump to page 7. Okay, and this one, I'd like to see pens on this one, just so that we can kind of practice thinking through these. So here's the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want in the situation below. So there's gonna be 4 scenarios with 3 options, and you choose which of those options is most aligned to what you would want. So if my doctor and another healthcare professional both decide that I am likely to die within a short period of time, and life support treatment, so again, transfusions, CPR, intubation, tube feeding, would only delay the moment of my death. So if those treatments are not projected to say, if you do this transfusion, you have another 5 years of life. It is saying, if we do this transfusion, it might give you another day or 2. So it's sort of in that moment close to death where medical treatment only prolongs it a little bit, but it doesn't cure it or give sort of exponential amounts of time. I want to have life support treatment. I do not want to have life support treatment. If it's been started, I'd like it stopped at that point in time. Or I want to have life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help. So if it could help with pain, if it could help with clarity. But I want my doctor to stop giving me life support treatment if it's not helping my condition or my symptoms.
Can you put in some other adverbs here in the third choice? Would it be legal to write those words also in here? You said life support treatment if my doctor believes it to help alleviate, to
You
help,
could write a little note of saying,
to relieve pain
yeah.
and keep me comfortable.
Yeah, you can add those things in
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Because, there are,
Oh, yeah, no,
you said
there's lots of-
variations, and depending on what you've seen,
Yep.
you might have made up your mind about what you want.
Yeah, so choose which of those 3 is most aligned for you right now. And then check it off. So now we have the same 3 options, but for the scenario of if you are in a coma and not expected to wake up or recover. So if your doctor and another healthcare professional both decide that you're in a coma from which you're not expected to wake up or recover, and there is brain damage, and life support treatment would only delay the moment of my death, same 3 options. You'd want it, you don't want it, the sort of nuanced middle of, if it's gonna help, I want some of it, if it's not gonna help, I don't.
And it doesn't 65 days.
You can write that down.
Well, sometimes you gotta be really specific.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, with all of this as specific as you can be, the better, because it helps. Like again, this document both helps you so that you know if you are asked these questions. So if your doctor asks and says, this is the situation, you've already thought about it, but it also gives clarity for if other people need to make those choices, because they are hard choices to make. And so as much guidance, that also then alleviates the stress and the anxiety and the worry of the person making the decisions. If they know, oh yeah, I've been given a 5-day, doctor, you have 5 days. If it isn't in 5 days, then we're gonna stop that treatment. They can then go to bed with a clear conscience because they know that that is what you want. And that is a lot of what this document is helping folks do the best they can in really hard situations.
I think the hardest part that I'm having trouble with is, like in that third choice, if my doctor believes it could help. That's assuming you have trust and faith in your doctor. And that one's a tough one for me.
Depends on what the word help is too.
Yeah, if you have a doctor who is in the framework of prolonging life is the most important thing no matter what, compared to a doctor who says, we can prolong it, but it's gonna be painful and you're not actually gonna have quality of life. We can do it, but I'm not gonna push it. And that for the folks who are in the Being Mortal book group, some of this might be sounding a little familiar of for those who aren't in that group, that book is one where a doctor and a surgeon who's been trained to try to keep people alive for as long as possible, and that is the marker of success, has some realizations through his experience of caring for his father as he's dying, through just his life as a doctor, that says, maybe what I've been taught isn't actually what we should be working towards. Maybe instead of keeping someone alive at all costs, we should say, what does it mean to live well? What does it mean to die well? And then let's do that. So yeah, a lot of this does hinge on whether you trust your medical professional and whether you trust your healthcare agent to be able to kind of push the medical professional in the ways that need to be pushed, yeah.
That's one of the reasons I respect and believe in hospice. The whole idea of hospice is it's probably the only time in your life when the agenda for your healthcare is all about the patient and only about the patient. The preventive stuff is gone, the hospital protocol is gone. This takes precedent because it's what the patient wants.
Exactly, yeah. And there's both hospice and palliative care can do that. One of the big differences, which is just a legal nuance, is that palliative care, there doesn't need to be a timeline on that. Actually, let me start with hospice. So for hospice, that is something that everyone, I believe, is legally entitled to with health care as it currently stands. With everything with healthcare, I do need to give the disclaimer of, this is true right now, will it be true in a week? I don't know, we're in a little bit of a free fall right now. So everyone is legally entitled to hospice care. And hospice, with that term specifically, only kicks in when your medical professional believes, with sort of the best of their knowledge, that you have 6 months or less to live. You might hear the term hospice being used more broadly than that, but the legal definition is if your medical professional thinks you have 6 months or less. Palliative care is not required to be covered by insurance, which I think is ridiculous. It's very similar to hospice in that it is patient-centered. It's saying, okay, we are not going to try to cure this anymore. We're just going to manage the symptoms and help you live the best you can. So in that, it's very aligned with hospice, and there's not a timeline on it. So someone might move to palliative care if they have a terminal cancer that they know they likely have 2 to 7 years left. They might choose to opt into palliative care at the beginning of that time and say, okay, I have 2 to 7 years. I just want to be as comfortable and as able to do what I want to do as possible. I'm not going to do aggressive chemo because that's going to limit what I can do. Like, palliative care isn't time-bound in the way that hospice, as a legal definition, is time-bound. And then the third one here, actually, well, for time's sake, we'll keep moving. But again, there's a third scenario here. I do encourage you to, again, not just put this document away and not look at it again, but to go back to it and kind of make sure it's filled out. So here are the wishes that are much closer to what we were talking about at the beginning, that are likely, some of them might be in a living will or another healthcare directive. But this is really where it starts to diverge some from that. And asks for my wish for how comfortable I want to be and my wish for how I want people to treat me. So again, cross out the things that you don't want. So for instance, you might not like music at all. And so you wouldn't want to have your favorite music played when possible until the time of your death. So you would cross that out if you're like, I might want music some of the time, but if I can't tell you that, I actually just don't want. I'd rather it be quiet. I'd rather be able to hear the birds outside. If you And I'll just read through all of these, and again, cross out the ones that you would not want. If all of them sound good to you, then you would have nothing crossed out at the end of this. So I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medicine to relieve my pain, even if that means I will be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. If I show signs of depression, nausea, shortness of breath, or hallucinations, I want my caregivers to do what they can to help me. I wish to have a cool cloth put on my head if I have a fever. Some folks, that's not a good sensation for them, and so they would not want that, and so you would cross it out. I want my lips and mouth kept moist to stop dryness. I wish to have warm baths often. I want to be kept fresh and clean at all times. I wish to be massaged with warm oils as often as I can be. I wish to have my favorite music played when possible until the time of my death. I want to have personal care like shaving, nail clipping, hair brushing, and teeth brushing, as long as they don't cause me pain or discomfort. I wish to have religious readings and well-loved poems read aloud when I am near death. I wish to know about options for hospice care to provide medical, emotional, and spiritual care for me and my loved ones.
Is there any way that we could be massaged with warm oil as often as possible now?
There you go.
Yeah, like,
Marie and I were at a marriage encounter with Pastor Ray, and that was one of the things that he gave us was oils that we had to massage one another with.
All right. That's kind of like a sixth witch, isn't it?
Well, we know what you guys are doing this
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, everybody at marriage encounter.
and so then wish for how I want people to treat me. And again, if you don't, you cross out the things you don't want, you keep the things that you would. So I wish to have people with me when possible. I want someone to be with me when it seems that death may come at any time. So if you know that you definitely don't want to die alone, and that you want someone with you, even if it's just a caring nurse, or even if it's a family member who's been kind of keeping vigil with you, if you know that you do not want to be alone under any circumstances, that's what this first one is. I wish to have my hand held and be talked to when possible, even if I don't seem to respond to the voice or touch of others. I wish to have others by my side praying for me when possible. I wish to have the members of my faith community told that I am sick and asked to pray for and visit me. I will say, if that is something you want, it is important when you're in the hospital to either contact us directly or tell the chaplain to contact us. Back in the day, a pastor could just kind of go to a hospital and say, hey, are any of my parishioners in this hospital? And the person working the front desk would look at the registrar, they would look down, they would say, oh yes, I see this person from Grace Lutheran is in room 101, go on up. That is not the case anymore, y'all.
Data privacy.
Yeah, the way that privacy and interpretation of HIPAA, not actually HIPAA, but interpretation of HIPAA, has played out means that the only way that Pastor Sarah and I know that you're in the hospital is if someone tells us. And the only way that someone tells us is if they know that it's okay to tell us. So if you tell the hospital chaplain when they come by, like, yes, please contact my faith community. If you have a family member who could call us and say, hey, so-and-so had a fall and is in the hospital, please come see them. You do sort of have to give them active consent, which is very different than how it was even like a decade and a half ago. It is just a different landscape.
Speaking of that, Pastor Reed, I was surprised, well, both Marie and I were surprised this morning to hear about Dean Johnson. So, I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, I picked him up and gave him a ride to church. So this must have been a sudden thing, or, I mean, because there were no prayers for him, so. Would have been nice to know, right? I mean, but you never
Yeah, sometimes you don't know until after.
Right.
Or he could have just went upstairs and took a nap.
Yeah. you never
Sometimes
know.
it is very
That's
sudden.
His friend did a couple of weeks ago, he just went upstairs and took a nap.
But yeah, so if you want people to know, you need to kind of actively make that wish known. Something I will often sort of repeat of like, we would love to pray for you and would love to come visit you. We need to know. There isn't sort of a central directory that pings when someone is in the hospital. It's just not how it works anymore.
I don't think they asked it on admission either.
I don't think they do ask it on admission either anymore. So it is sort of, again, a changing
There may
landscape.
be a thing where you can check if you want
Yeah.
your family to be notified, or the pastors to be
Or they,
notified.
they even talk to the chaplain.
Yeah.
So I wish to be cared for with kindness and cheerfulness, not sadness. And that's not to say that the people who are caring for you won't be sad that you're dying, but it does mean that you don't want them to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, like, to bring a bit of a like, this is sad and this is life, and so we're gonna be kind and we're gonna laugh at the things that are silly that are still happening when the IV tube like squirts out or something, like, that can be a moment of laugh. Like, sort of just the attitude of not wanting it to feel like a sick room or a death room. I wish to have pictures of my loved ones in my room, near my bed. If I'm not able to control my bowel or bladder functions, I wish for my clothes and bed linens to be kept clean and for them to be changed as soon as they can be. I want to die in my home if that can be done. So again, if any of those are things you would want, cross them out. And then here is where we're gonna spend the last few minutes, the last chunk of our time. And this, I would say, again, as we go through this document, we get further and further from the things that are likely included in a standard living will and more towards what do I want. So this is my wish for what I want loved ones to know. So I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. I wish to be forgiven for the times I've hurt my family, friends, and others. I wish to have my family, friends, and others know that I forgive them for when they may have hurt me in my life. I wish for my family and friends to know that I do not fear death itself. I think it's not the end, but a new beginning. I wish for all of my family members to make peace with each other before my death, if they can. So yeah, so this is one where there's a lot.
Pie in the sky.
Or, add another one, please notify my cousins. I've had a cousin call to wish her older sister a happy birthday, and the kid didn't answer the phone, said, oh, she died 6 months ago. Let the other cousins know.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these, like if you're in a family system that has abuse in it, some of these are not gonna be applicable and you're not gonna wanna do them. Or if you know that your death is not gonna magically make peace in the family, and that's not something that you want people spending their time on, cross it out. I wish for my family and friends to think about what I was like before I became seriously ill. I want them to remember me in this way after death. I wish for my family and friends and caregivers to respect my wishes, even if they don't agree with them. I wish for my family and friends to look at my dying as a time of personal growth for everyone, including me. This will help me live a meaningful life in my final days. I wish for my family and friends to get counseling if they have trouble with my death. I want memories of my life to give them joy and not sorrow. And then here's 3 very specific ones. After my death, I would like my body to be either buried or cremated. Circle which one. My body or remains should be put in the following location. So if you have a cemetery plot somewhere, that's where you would write that down. If you know that you have if you know that your sibling or your spouse or your cousin is going to take your ashes and have them at their house, and that's what you've talked about, put that down. And the following person knows my funeral wishes. So if you notice the arc of our forums, we did this one last, because we've now done the funeral planning forum. So for folks who have not done that already, we did that forum and then led to this forum, kind of tracking the trajectory. But again, similar to this document, it's all great if you plan your funeral. If no one has that document, no one can use the document. Like we've had a couple, and I would also just say, if you think you've planned your funeral and you think that we have that paperwork, double check with us, because so far we have not found, unless there's a small chance it's in Pastor Sarah's office, but I don't think it is. We have not found sort of an archive of like a bunch of people's funeral plans. We were checking when Ingrid had died unexpectedly to say, we know she did funeral plans. Where are they? And we didn't have a copy of them, the funeral home did, and they sent them to us, but even though it was sort of a grace form that she did, we searched, we checked all of the various paper file places. So if you think that we have your funeral plans, please confirm with us whether or not we actually do. We have a new updated packet on how to do it, and that form's gonna go up in Breeze, so it'll be easier. But if you think we have it, check with us. And then here's a space where if you have already done more specific funeral plans, this is gonna be redundant and you don't need to do it again. But if anyone asks how I want to be remembered, please say the following about me. If you are someone who worked a job that was a job for a paycheck, but it wasn't your passion, and you worry that people are gonna just focus on that in remembering you, put the other things down here. If you think that there is an aspect of your life that is so far in the past that anyone doing the remembrances might not know, but you want them to know, put it here. Like if in your 20s you raised goldfish as your kind of hobby and passion, and then moved and then never raised a goldfish again, but you really want people to know that, put that down. And then again, this second question is very redundant to funeral planning, so we're just gonna read it and keep moving. But if there's a memorial service, here's some of the things I want included in that. And then this is, the last section is sort of here's the space for everything else, or anything else. And again, the other thing you can do with documents like this, if you have a living will that you like and you want to keep active, you can just put, this is in conjunction with my living will. So this is a binding document that should be read with the other one. And it's generally advised for if you have more than one document. So if you have your 5 wishes that has the things that aren't in your living will, and you have your living will, standing for this, it's best to write on both of them. This living will should be read in conjunction with my 5 wishes document. And on the 5 wishes document, this is supplemental to my living will. So there is a way to have more than one active, you just need to explicitly say that. And something I learned at a healthcare directives workshop that I did is that if you attach additional pages to any of these documents, make sure you write on the top of them what document it's supposed to go with, and sign it and date that as well. So if you have your 5 wishes and your funeral plan, make sure they talk to each other, so if someone picks one up, they would know what to do with it. Okay, any questions? Yes?
This section on wishes. Now, I think I know the answer to my question, but take, for example, the one, I wish for my family members to make peace with each other before my death. Okay, that's in this document. How is that going to be imparted to all those people?
You would need, if it is a situation where you don't think they would know by reading it, because there's some family systems where if they see that that's your wish, they know exactly who you're talking about.
Okay.
And there are some family systems where they wouldn't know.
Well, I think that what occurred to me was this document is going to be known by your main caregiver. And that person being close to the person who's, let's say, passed away, is going to be asked about that person, and they can express these things, right? It can become part of the conversation. But still, I'm amused by some of these things.
Oh yeah, some of
You
them
know,
are.
what do you want for Christmas? World peace.
And for some-
So, but I think
We'll name it.
yeah, I understand how this is supposed to work, but this part was a little more dubious than some of the other parts.
Well, and it also varies. So I know that so I have an uncle in my family system who's fairly estranged from the rest of the family. And I know that one of my grandma's wishes were that her children, so my father and his siblings, would reconcile. And they actually took that as an invitation of like, okay, we are a little bit estranged, let's maybe reconnect some. Because that was what grandma wanted. And so had they not known that, it might have continued to rift. And then due to choices that uncle made in caregiving for another family member, that rift has reopened. But for a time, the rift had healed a little bit because they knew that was one of my grandma's wishes. So it's not impossible. It's also not something you have a ton of control over, but just naming it of like, hey, all of this family tension that y'all haven't been able to figure out while I'm alive, maybe my death will do something that will soften your heart and work to heal that.
Well, it comes down to, it's a wish.
Exactly.
It's not an exact, it's a, this is my hope.
Yep.
The one other thing I would say is, if you have children and you put them in charge of all of this, talk to your children and tell them. Because my parents have put me in charge. And I specifically asked my mother to go over things with me. And I said, I need to know what you want for your funeral. Well, I have it written down on a slip of paper in my Bible. Well, how was I supposed to know this? And she goes, well, it changes all the time. That's fine, but you need to have, and I'm like pulling teeth having that conversation. And I love her to death, and she goes, well, it's not for me anyway. And I'm like, well, really, it is for you. Yes, it's for us that are still here, but what we want is to honor you. And so it is a struggle. So if there's any way you can speak to your children, if you give them this huge responsibility, please do that.
I'm the receipt saver, and I see 2 3-ring binders at our house. And then the same copies at Eric's house and the same copy at Christopher's house. It would be an instruction letter saying, the first one's the living will, kids. Next one is my wishes. The third one is the power of attorney over my finances. And then here's my funeral. And there's going to be a lot of Post-its on it, so pay attention. But
As long as they know.
yeah, we're all talking about, oh, what did they want? This is a way of, easing what they have to go through. And making sure that your statement of faith is somewhere in there.
I just want to make a comment. When my mom passed away, my dad, when I walked into his home, he said, I looked at him and I said, Daddy, I'm so sorry, and just buried my head in his shoulder. He said, Mama didn't want anybody crying, so stop crying. And you know what? That is one of the worst things that you can do when somebody is saddened, is to make them stop crying, because that grieving is a part of the process and it has to come out. So it's just a natural thing for people to cry. You know, it just is.
So also think about how your wishes would land if someone else had told them to you. Okay, thank you all.
Pastor Reed.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, yeah, well, Pastor Sarah and I saw each other for the first time this morning in many, many weeks. And next week, we sort of take a dramatic shift in our forum tone. So we've been kind of dwelling in being mortal, living well, doing forums on funeral planning, hard conversations, 5 wishes. Next week, we're doing an interactive Holy Week. So we'll go through Holy Week, and this is for all ages, and especially if you're someone who isn't going to be able to make all of the evening services in Holy Week, this is a way to sort of experience those rituals in one chunk of time. And if you can make those evening services, it's a great kind of sneak peek or teaser for that. So the forums sort of we are now moving out of our theme and going into Holy Week.
Life, eternal life, okay.
Exactly.
Very good. Anything else?